Welcome to Tripod, the audio advertising podcast. In this episode, we delve into how advertisers can gauge the success of their audio campaigns using measurement and attribution. So an advertiser's chosen to use audio, and they'll obviously want to know whether their campaign's successful. We touched on this briefly in an earlier episode, but what are the ways for advertisers to judge the success of their campaign? Who wants to start?
I think there are various ways for talking from my point of view on the media owner side for an advertiser to judge success, and that is, we've kind of talked about it, like owning search terms that are relating to the call to action in a copy. We can unleash things like brand lift studies, where we work with Octave, we work with our partner in called Veritonic, who will judge campaigns based on like awareness, favorability, intent, and have a research panel that can monitor that. And that's something that is we get clients, I would say 90% of the briefs that we get given, clients are asking for that, because traditionally, as we've talked about as well, it is very difficult to measure attribution in audio. Not that that's a bad thing. I think when people are trying to do that, sometimes they're getting caught up on too much of how they use other mediums. And other ways to attribute, of course, across the digital space and in podcasts as well, is you can have pixel-based tags that will fire when you've been exposed to an audio ad, and that will speak to a related tag on a client website, and you'll be able to attribute someone being exposed to an audio ad and then taking an action on site, and then also on the back of that understanding whether it's a site where they can buy something, what kind of basket size they had, how much they spent, how much time they spent on the website. Obviously they're all metrics that they can then feed into wider campaigns and test and learn and build from there.
And I think outside of those style of attribution, there's a lot of work that the advertiser can help themselves. So if you are testing regionally, which we encourage a first-time advertiser to do, is to look at the average traffic to a website or wherever you're sending them prior to the campaign, then as the campaign is running, and then post that campaign, but also look at that region versus the rest of the country and see what traffic that has driven. The other way you can do that, track attribution, is have an offer or an incentive or a promotional code. But importantly, when you are sending people to your website, make sure that promotional code or whatever action you ask them to do is fairly explicit on the front page of your website or specific landing page to enable them to do that. So where you can, if you're spending more money, access other databases, there's a lot of work you can do yourselves or with us to do yourselves, which is look at Google Analytics in terms of driving to a site, but also making sure you are benchmarking previous campaigns or activity before the campaign starts, and knowing what the objective is, because it varies by media, it varies by budget in terms of what you're spending, what research you can invest in. But those would be the main ways, I think, in terms of certainly for linear radio, which is harder to track than some of the digital audio options. It is benchmarking response prior to the campaign and after the campaign, and using codes where you can to elicit a response that you've known has come from the radio listener.
Do you think measurement and attribution will evolve as the years roll on? I mean, at the moment, the way that audiences are measured are completely different between the audio platforms. Do you think one day they'll all be united? And there'll be one easy way to tell?
I think there may be larger samples of cross-media measurement, but I don't think you'll see a one single source measurement of audio. I don't think, because the way the data is collected and the way people interact with those mediums is slightly different. So RAJAR is the main radio survey for linear radio stations, and then within that they have something called a MIDAS survey. I'm getting too complicated here with these brand names, but a MIDAS survey takes a snapshot of about 2,500 RAJAR respondents, then asks them those deeper level questions about digital audio media, such as podcasts, such as streaming services. And that's where we get a lot of data from. Could that sample size be larger? I think it will eventually start to get larger because the proportion of listening to other connected platforms, digital audio podcasts, is growing. But that's where we get our sample from. But in terms of, RAJAR is a massive survey. It's about 25,000 people a quarter. It's the largest UK media survey for all media. It's changed slightly because of the way the COVID pandemic impacted on it, but it's still the largest survey, and it really is. It's fairly rudimental, I guess, but it is people ticking a box or registering by quarter hour, half hour, what radio stations they're listening to. So it has been tried and tested to go to a more passive measurement. So watches, for example, or electronic device that you wear that can pick up codes on different stations, but it's never really taken off because it's massively expensive. Massively expensive. I mean, RAJAR is expensive enough, and to having the investment from the radio groups or the BBC, which is RAJAR shared by those two, to pay for anything different. But I don't see one single source of measurement, not in the foreseeable future.
Surely there's going to come a time then, though, where traditional broadcast radio isn't broadcast anymore over those huge aerials. Everybody will be connected, and then everything will be attributable, won't it?
Yeah, completely. I think we're obviously, we've seen how, I suppose, smart speaker growth in the home. You've got to think effectively. The old radio box is going to go out the door, and everybody will be either a smart device that they listen to the majority of their audio on. It's great for the fact that we've seen that kind of like radio has massively benefited from that, and so many smart speakers in the home. I'm sure we'll see a jump again as Christmas goes by and more smart speakers go into the home and things like that. So yes, eventually you're hoping there is attributable elements within that digital, but I think still, even in that kind of smart speaker space, it's still quite hard at the moment to kind of track exactly what someone might be doing, because it's not an interactive sort of like environment in terms of. So unless you're kind of looking at kind of like more direct stuff through skills and stuff like that, and asking someone to place something in a basket or something like this, it's still quite hard to actually know what someone's done. So I think that's where it's probably going to come down to more kind of, I suppose, research from the likes of how companies move forward, like DAX, Octave, and people like that, and Global and Bauer, in terms of like how they are tracking kind of like who's been served the ad and then what they've done afterwards through working with the advertisers themselves, because I think that everyone's got to play a role in that if they want to kind of look at how it's going to things are going to attribute, and whether our advertisers or our clients giving more data and allowing access to websites and things like that for suppliers and stuff like this, so we can connect up that person once we've advertised them easier, which should be easier because we're all on an online like environment or ecosystem, and then that's going to benefit for everyone, and we can start to see kind of like, okay, we can start to look at kind of optimization around our plans. We already do some of this now, but I think when we look at kind of radio and some of the things that come out, or we look at digital audio, and when people have been served ads and they go to clients' websites and stuff like this, we can start to see things that kind of, okay, what is like, how many times on average does someone hear the ad before they actually take an action? So we can start to optimize towards the opportunity to hear, for example, or we can see the kind of right interactions bigger at this time of day. We see more people go through the website this time of day, so we can start to optimize towards those things. And you think eventually, yes, we're going to get to a point where we should hopefully be able to do that more as we kind of like, as I suppose, radio listening. But I think radio is one side of it. We've then got another side of it, like podcasts, and we've got like Spotify and stuff like that. And yeah, I think it's hard for that overall audio ecosystem. A one size fits all measurement tool is something that's just very hard to see on the horizon at the moment.
Not because there's two things. One, advertisers don't pay for the measurement, so it's got to be funded by someone else if to take on these bigger projects, if it's ever feasible. But also the current survey systems determine the size of the radio station, and then determines the revenue they can actually take. So it's not as simple as saying, well, the holy grail is to get this one system, because it may affect revenues of radio stations. And I think there may be a reluctance to turn the market upside down and move towards a single source measurement if the answer is not correct. Because if the answer is not correct in terms of will I maintain my current revenue because RAJAR says my station reaches 1 million people a week, that has effect on my revenue. If we go to another source of measurement and it says my radio station now only reaches 700,000 people a week, well then you're going to get less revenue. So I think it's not as it's a tricky path to navigate, because there are huge implications for the revenue of the market. So it's not just about programming. Is this DJ more successful this RAJAR period to the last RAJAR period? It's have I got more listeners, and can I sell more listeners to advertisers and media agencies? And so I think there's probably general acceptance. Maybe there could be improvements, but there's also general acceptance that I'm quite happy with my 1 million listeners a week, and I don't want to get 700,000 listeners a week.
So several ways to track the success of your audio campaign there. In our final episode this season, we're going to look at where AI might take the audio industry. Follow us so you don't miss that. And for more, visit trisonic.co.uk.